Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Ag Forecast brought to you by Agrible, the makers of Morning Farm Report. Our software gives growers the insights to make the best decisions possible about their operations. Well, in last week's video update, I discussed how Tropical Storm Harvey, had the potential to maybe reinvigorate as it got into the Gulf of Mexico and the Bay of Campeche. Earlier model runs suggested that Harvey was going to go across parts of the Yucatan and eventually get into Mexico. But we warned about how if any part of Harvey were to get into these very warm waters here, redevelopment was possible. And sure enough, that's what's going on. Right now, the remnants of Harvey are forecast over the next 24 hours to re-strengthen back into a tropical storm and potentially reach Category 1 hurricane strength as it makes landfall somewhere in Texas and through here. Hurricane watches are out across this region, and tropical storm watches kind of flank the hurricane watch area. The biggest threat from Harvey, though, is going to be rainfall. And our biggest question is what's going to happen to Harvey once it makes landfall. Is it going to move up the Mississippi River or kind of move out here and stay along the Gulf Coast? Those are the big unknowns with this forecast. Wednesday's ECMWF, that's the European model, its run for Harvey kind of gives us both solutions. You can see here that Harvey's going to come right toward the Texas coastline. This is where the most kind of prolific flooding is going to be. But the question remains as to whether Harvey stays down here in a far southerly track or if the steering winds allow it to come up the lower Mississippi River Valley and potentially get into the eastern Corn Belt with some of the remnants of this precipitation. So we're going to have to watch this one very closely from now all the way through the end of this week, getting into the beginning of next week as to where its potential position is going to be. Now here's one of the obstacles that Harvey has to deal with. Now, earlier this week, we had this fantastic cold front that came right through the middle part of the Corn Belt, brought quite a bit of rain right into the, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, into Missouri. And we're going to talk about that rainfall in just a few moments. But that front, which has continued to sag further to the south, now sits right here along the Gulf Coast and East Coast. Now, it's cleared out the skies for us as higher air pressures moved in here in the Corn Belt, but Harvey's going to have to interact with this boundary. And that boundary right now looks something like this. You can actually see the showers and storms firing on the position of that cold front. And here's the cloud field of Tropical Storm, well, eventually Tropical Storm Harvey, as it's kind of set to make a trajectory right here towards Texas. By the way, we're also watching another disturbance near Florida that may continue to develop as it moves back across Florida and get out here into kind of the Gulf Stream area and go up the East Coast. We'll watch that one closely here in a few moments as well. But when we kind of look at all of this in whole, this is at least what the NAM model is suggesting. And I'm showing you the NAM for a particular reason. The NAM is not known very well for capturing the strength of any tropical system, but I'm showing it to you because of what I'm seeing it doing over the Corn Belt very soon. So as we get through this was late Wednesday night's run of the NAM model. You can see Harvey coming up here toward the Texas coastline. You can see that second system moving over parts of Florida here. So this is the second one we have to watch out for. But notice that, let's watch it again, Thursday into Friday and Saturday. High pressure dominates most of the Corn Belt. And it's not until Saturday, let's kind of pause this so we can take a better look here. It's not really until we get into early morning on Saturday that we see a weak low pressure system moving through parts of basically Nebraska, South Dakota, and out ahead of it, potentially some showers and thunderstorms moving through parts of Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, maybe even some Minnesota, and then Iowa. As we move into most of the day on Saturday, we're gonna have to be on the lookout for how this system continues to evolve, because it could by Sunday be kind of bringing in some showers and storms back through parts of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois. So as we get into our weekend, getting into Sunday, we're going to have to watch out for some more shower and thunderstorm activity here. But until then, higher atmospheric pressure dominates this area. We'll take a closer look at that again. But we're going to come back to Harvey and this potential system over here in the next few moments. So here's the thing that might keep Harvey out of the Corn Belt. We're looking at the flow of the atmosphere on August 24th. So Harvey has made its way inland. It's sitting here spinning over parts of Texas and parts of northern Mexico. And the question is, will these winds, which is kind of looking here at the winds at about 3.5 miles above our heads, are these winds going to be enough to kind of steer Harvey and keep it farther to the south? That is the big question. Now, when we look at it in aggregate, here's the next 10 days or so of rainfall as forecast by the late afternoon model run on Wednesday from the GFS. I got the recording done just before the full 0Z GFS came in, so I'm going to look at this first. Now, Harvey is going to be dumping an enormous amount of rain down here in Texas. I mean, look at this. It's almost topping my chart here with the total rainfall. But the 12Z run from Wednesday, that's the early morning run on Wednesday, actually brought the remnants of Harvey right up into the lower and mid-Mississippi River Valley, with the afternoon run keeping it further to the south. The ECMWF run was very similar to the mid-morning GFS run, which kept, again, most of the rain here, but then allowed some of the moisture from Harvey to get back up into, well, parts of Tennessee and Kentucky, going, of course, through Mississippi on its way. And so right now, there's just too much uncertainty for me to make a call on this, as the models have been kind of flip-flopping on where a lot of that rainfall was going to go. So on Sunday, we'll of course know what's going to happen, but I need you to be watching, especially if you're farming down here in the mid-Mississippi, lower Mississippi River Valley, for the potential for Harvey's moisture to kind of make it up into this area. Don't have a lot of strong confidence on what it's going to do, but I want you to keep a close eye on that. Now, when we take a step back and say, well, where's Harvey putting down its precipitation where we recently had it? Well, the last 14 days have been very dry in that particular part of Texas. But don't forget, some coastal regions in Texas had some major flooding problems, and so has Louisiana and in parts of New Orleans, where some pumps still aren't working to kind of pump out the lower lying areas. So Harvey could be a major disaster along the coast. But as we've been seeing, and the long-range European model's been doing a great job of this, the center states have been quite wet. We've had western Iowa getting a lot of great rains over the last 14 days, as has Nebraska, parts of the Dakotas, and Minnesota. We've had some pockets of dryness, but that rain that came through on that front earlier this week kind of hit central Illinois, hit western Iowa, hit parts of Missouri, regions that had been, in some ways to think about it, kind of dry here, although we had some major flooding again south of Kansas City. But this rain came through and probably went a long way to help that bean crop finish very, very well. So the fact that we're going to be drying out over the next few days, or continuing to dry out, I should say, because it's been dry for a couple of days now here in the central part of the country, this rain that came through is going to go a long way to kind of help us sustain that. Plus, remember, it's been quite cool after that front passed and the temperatures have dropped off. Show you the latest long-range update from the European model. So this one was released on August 21st. What we see here is that the European model keeps its center states wetter than average. It's been very consistent with this picture, but you can kind of see the model's kind of wavering back and forth on whether or not this particular region is going to be near average or potentially drier than average. I'll tell you this, though. The rain that just came into this area is going to go a long way to finish off the bean crop. So maybe if we get into this time into September and it's a little bit drier than average, this isn't that big of a deal. But maybe as we move toward harvest, if we continue to stay wet in the central states, this could start to hamper harvest efforts. Now, what's interesting is that the flow pattern for Thursday looks something like this. A big ridge in the center part of North America digging into a pretty substantial trough here going across the Great Lakes. And there you can see Harvey spinning in the Gulf of Mexico. What is interesting about this is that enough cold air is going to sneak into the Great Lakes that we could see some temperatures that get into the low 30s, but primarily that will be confined to the UP of Michigan on early Thursday morning and again on early Friday morning. Here's just a look at those Friday morning temperatures. You see I contour this map right at freezing, and you can see that black contour right there showing you that maybe at one spot here in the UP might get down to some freezing temperatures. But we are expecting to see across this area I'm kind of highlighting right now temperatures that will get into the 40s, maybe even upper 30s, especially in the UP. This is not a major frost threat at this point for anything where we grow a lot of corn. We'd have to see that trough digging much farther south this time of year to really potentially bring in a frost threat for parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But I want to keep you all aware of the fact that the flow pattern we're in right now really doesn't do much to allow much heat to build back in. So the animation we're watching, I'm going to explain what it is really quickly. It's kind of showing us the position of the troughs and ridges throughout the atmosphere in the northern hemisphere. I've color-coded this now according to anomalous heights, which means the blues are deeper troughs and the ridges are shown in red. And what you see as we kind of move through is that by the time we get into our weekend, that flow pattern doesn't really relent. The heat stays out west and a broad trough stays over the east. And as we just kind of keep going through the forecast into Monday, to Tuesday, Wednesday, you see a very similar pattern. And that is, we're not seeing anything that would resemble heat stress in really any part of the Corn Belt. Most of the heat's going to stay out west as we move all the way through next week as well. So we do need to keep a lookout for the potential for an early frost, but I'm not talking about a frost that's going to probably happen in September for the main part of the Corn Belt. It could just be, an earlier frost in October. And that's because that flow pattern right now isn't suggesting that it's going to change too much. The long-range European model keeps the center states cooler than average, keeps the western United States warm, and that generally means, a positive P&A pattern where we basically have a big ridge out west and a broader trough over the east, and something we talked about in detail in our last video. So now that was kind of a lot to digest, but you got a good look for the weather over the next few days, got an idea about what Tropical Storm Harvey is going to do. We understand what the overall pattern is going to mean in terms of our temperatures moving into the rest of August. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this forecast. We hope you look forward to Agrible's next Ag Forecast on Monday. To get morning farm report for your operations, complete with a daily email that shows a snapshot of your field conditions each morning, go to morningfarmreport.com. Sign up for a free account. Full grower accounts are free if you sign up for our Sustainable Yield Program or for growers who work with AD merchandisers. Look forward to talking to you again early on Monday morning.